In 1837, while in church, John Brown stood up, raised his right hand, and said this: "Here before God, in the presence of these witnesses, I consecrate my life to the destruction of slavery." John Brown was born in 1800 to Owen and Ruth Brown, who were very religious people, and this created a huge impact on John's life. His parents were also abolitionists, believing that slavery was the evil of all evil, teaching this to John and his 8 siblings. When John was 12, he witnessed a slave boy being beaten by the slave boy's owner. This event scarred John and was a major cause in his beliefs on slavery. In 1805, John's father opened up a tannery where John worked when he was older. Some of the other employees described John as being born to give commands and could persuade others to follow him very easily. This shows that John was a natural leader. In 1849, John Brown and his family moved to North Elba, New York, a free black community. At that time, the Brown family was one, if not the only, white family who worked, ate, and lived equally with blacks. In May of 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed by Congress, and it read, "The issue of slavery would be decided by the residents of each territory." After John got word of this, he and 2 of his sons moved to Kansas to help make Kansas a free state. In May of 1856, pro-slavery gangs ransacked Lawrence, Kansas. This angered John, but when Preston Brooks beat Charles Sumner on the floor of Congress with a cane, John knew he had to take action. John's action was the Potawatomi Massacre. The Potawatomi Massacre was John Brown and a band of abolitionist settlers dragging 5 pro-slavery men out of their homes in the middle of the night and hacking them to pieces. After this, John acquired the nickname Potawatomi Brown. The Potawatomi Massacre is what started, or at least was the first event in a period of turmoil in Kansas called Bleeding Kansas. Bleeding Kansas, also called Bloody Kansas or the Border War, occurred between 1854 and 1861, where pro-slavery forces and anti-slavery forces fought in the Kansas territory with guerrilla warfare tactics. John was a powerful force on the anti-slavery side. Soon after the Potawatomi Massacre, on June 2, 1856, John Brown led 29 other abolitionists and attacked Henry C. Pate and around 30 pro-slavery men who were traveling with Henry just a few miles east of present-day Baldwin, Kansas. This event came to be known as the Battle of Blackjack. The reason Henry Pate was out in Kansas was to punish Brown for the Potawatomi Massacre because of how John went unpunished by the United States. After the battle, Henry said, "I went to take Old Brown, and Old Brown took me." John Brown won the Battle of Blackjack and took Henry Pate and 22 of his men prisoner, but released them when his 2 sons were released from their captors. Soon after the battle, John moved back to New England to start his grand plan.
Here is where I would attack first, the arsenal at Harper's Ferry. I will lead them through Virginia, rouse the thousands of discontented slaves who will flock to join us, then sweep down through the South, through the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Then, with the entire nation in a state of chaos, we can dictate our own terms.
Yes, John Brown's plan was to raid the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, have slaves join his ranks, arm the slaves, and start a slave insurrection. Except there were a few things missing. He had no money, and he had no men. John entrusted the help of the Secret Six to fix that. The Secret Six was made up of 6 men: Thomas Higginson, Samuel Howe, Theodore Parker, Franklin Stanborn, Jarrett Smith, and George Stearns. They funded John's raid secretly, because if word of the raid got out to the public, all men involved could be charged with treason, and treason is punishable by death. Also, while in New England getting funds and men for his raid, John spoke with the one and only Frederick Douglass. John tried to convince Douglass to join him on the raid, but Douglass thought that the raid was a horrible idea. But Douglass did add one man to John's party, Shields Green. Shields Green was a runaway slave who lived with Douglass before joining John. Months before the raid, John rented a farmhouse in the neighboring hills of Harper's Ferry. He rented the house from Dr. Booth Kennedy, and the farmhouse was named the Kennedy Farm. While staying at the Kennedy Farm, the leadership so many say John was born with started to show more prominent than ever. One night at the farm, John gathered all men who were there and resigned. He told everyone to pick a new leader. Quickly and unanimously, John was voted to lead the raid. This shows that John was the right person for the job, the right leader to change America. On the night of October 16, 1859, John and 20 other men started the raid. Although John had planned to have closer to 100 men, his 20 men did not stop the raid from taking place. Harper's Ferry, Virginia is located where the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers meet. John chose to attack here because of the neighboring hills around Harper's Ferry, where him and his men could hide, and because he could easily march into the south from Harper's Ferry. First, they cut telegraph lines leading into the city. Then, they captured the guards on the bridge, and moved swiftly and silently into town. Once in town, John and his men took many prisoners. One prisoner, Lewis Washington, was the great-grandnephew of George Washington. John was extremely considerate for his prisoners, even saying that he felt sorry for them and their families. While the raid was occurring, residents of Harper's Ferry, George and Mary Mawase, wrote letters to their daughter in England. This was their first letter. October 17th. Oh, my dear friend, such a day as this. Heaven forbid that I should ever witness such another. Last night a band of ruffians took possession of the town, took the keys of the armory, and made captive a great many of our citizens. I cannot write the particulars, for I am too nervous, for such a sight I just behold. Our men chased them into the river just below here, and I saw them shot down like dogs. I saw one poor wretch rise above the water and had someone strike him with a club. He sank again in a moment. They dragged him out a corpse. I do not know yet how many men are shot, but I shall never forget the sight. They just marched with two wretches, their arms bound fast, up the jail. My dear husband shouldered his rifle and went to join our men. May God protect him. Even while I write, I hear guns in the distance. I heard they were fighting down the street. After cutting telegraph lines and taking prisoners, John and his men made a fatal error. They stopped a train, shot and killed one of the workers on the train, and after a few minutes let the train pass. This train gave the first word of the raid and informed Washington, D.C. Soon after letting the train pass, John, his men, and their captives barricaded themselves in the armory. After the train informed Washington, D.C. of the raid, President James Buchanan ordered Robert E. Lee to command militia and federal forces to apprehend Brown and his men. Very quickly, Lee's men surrounded Brown and his men, and militia from nearby Charlestown swarmed Brown from all directions, making escape nearly impossible. But Brown could have escaped earlier, but did not. That was another one of his mistakes. With bullets showering the armory from all directions, Brown's men wanted to surrender, but Old Brown kept fighting. He sent J.E.B. Stuart under a white flag that was respected by Brown and his men to negotiate a surrender by Brown. Brown could have shot and killed Stuart like he was a mosquito, but Brown denied all surrender plans and sent Stuart back, where he became a major force for the Confederates during the Civil War. John sent one of his men under a white flag to talk with Lee, but he was shot down under the white flag. Not long after that, Brown sent one of his own sons also under a white flag. He was also shot, but he survived only to crawl back to Brown. During the night of October 18th, 1859, U.S. Marines knocked down the door to the armory, where Brown and his men were hiding, and captured many of them. Brown's attempt to end slavery was over. Brown was arrested and sent to Charlestown, where on November 2nd, 1859, was found guilty of murder, treason, and attempting to start a slave insurrection, and he was to be hung 1 month later on December 2nd. When December 2nd, 1859 rolled around, Brown rode his coffin to the gallows where he would spend his last moments on this earth. As Brown ascended the gallows, a poet in the crowd said that the gallows would become as holy as the cross. Brown also looked as if he was more of a willing assistant than a man soon to be executed. The first thing Brown said when he got to the top of the gallows was about how beautiful the country was. He said it as if he was unaware of his fate. Those were John's last spoken words, but his true last words were written on a small note that he handed to his executioner.
I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land can never be purged away but with blood.
The trapdoor was soon sprung, and John Brown was suspended between heaven and earth for 3 minutes before his lifeless body was put in his coffin. Although his life was over, John Brown's legacy lived on and changed the nation. John's raid and execution sent the South into a frenzy, fearing more attacks from the North. And within a few years, the South seceded from the Union, causing the Civil War. During the war, Union soldiers wrote a song that they marched to, called John Brown's Body. Some parts of the song show how much John had an impact on the soldiers.
John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on.
That part shows that even though his body is gone, John's legacy continues to have an impact on the world.
His truth is marching on.
John Brown was a leader who died a martyr, and his legacy is one that will continue to be evident now and forever.